Good afternoon. We will begin with the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. So please think carefully about the motivation, think carefully about what the real sources of refuge are, and think about what we need refuge from. And please recite the prayer. O Sanje Chodan Soge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dane Chapsum Ji Dage Jin Sogi Besunam Ji Drola Penjer Sunje Drobar Sho Sangye Chodan Soge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dane Chapsum Che Dage Jinso Gipe Sunam Je Drola Penjer Sanje Drobar Sho Sangye Chodan Soge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dane Chapsum Che Dage Jinso Gibe Sunam Je Drola Penjer Sanje Drobar Sho Semjen Tamjen Dewa Tan Dewe Judan Dembar Jurji Donga Dan Donga Ji Judan Rawa Jurji Donga Mebe Tewa Tamba Tam Mindrawa Jurji Nyeden Shadani Tandralwe Tanyon Shembola Nebra Jurji. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas, the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious root gurus. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And now think to yourself that the sufferings of samsara are unbearable. And if they are unbearable for us, they are unbearable for all sentient beings. And since there are many more of them than just us as individuals, their happiness and their freeing them of suffering is more important than freeing ourselves. And in fact, if we want to free ourselves truly from suffering, we can only do it by working to free all other sentient beings. So think to yourself that we must bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space to the state of the perfect happiness, the unwavering state of Buddhahood. And in order to do this, we must practice the Dharma, but if we practice the Dharma without understanding it, our practice will not get very far, so we need to engage in listening and contemplation. And the first of these steps is listening. And so think to yourself that we are listening to the Dharma this afternoon for this reason, and remind yourself of this motivation of bodhicitta. The Dharma that we are listening to is the verses on the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by the Ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary. And the verses have 8 chapters, and of the 8 chapters we are speaking about the fourth area, teachings on karma. The teachings on karma begin with a short description of how all worlds arise from karma, all worlds and sentient beings, remembering that the word world refers to both. The world that we live in, the external world, all of us and all sentient beings who live in it, all arise from karma. Then there's a section on the understanding of karma. And finally, there's a concluding section, a summary, teaching the synonyms of dharmas as a summary. So we are in the middle section, the understanding of karma, which also has 3 sections. The identification of karma, the presentation of karma, and the meaning of karma as explained in the sutras. And the meaning of karma as explained in the sutras has 2 parts, the general teachings and the teachings on specific karmas, or specific explanations. And so we are in the passage on the specific explanations, which has 3 parts, the explanation of the 3 obscurations to discard, the explanation of the 3 bases of meritorious action to rely upon, or that is, to put into practice, and the explanation of the 3 virtuous precursors. And so we're in the middle of the first still, even though we're not really talking specifically about the obscurations anymore. We're kind of on a little bit of a tangent it's not a tangent so much, but as an elaboration. So this explanation of the discards has the discussion of the 3 essence of the 3 discards, the karmic the 3 obscurations. So that's the karmic obscurations, the afflicted obscurations, and the obscurations of full ripening. Then there is which obscurations are where, that is, in which realms of samsara. And the bad news is that here in the no, that's not bad news. And we only have 2 of them. I was thinking that here we can have all 3, but we can't. We can only have 2 of the 3, right? Which one can't we have? Think about that. Explaining karmic obscurations in particular, which we certainly can have. Okay, where are we? And so this has the section on the explanation of karmic, has the topics of the heinous deeds and the near heinous deeds, and we're speaking about the near heinous deeds. And one of the near heinous deeds is is to kill a certain bodhisattva. And so as an elaboration of that, there's the question, what is a certain bodhisattva? This is certain as in definite, not certain as in like that certain one as opposed to the other one. Right, so this means certain as in definite. Definitely going to awaken to Buddhahood. So what do we mean by that? And so so we're on the bottom of page 300, or near the bottom of page 374 in the book in the PDF. Or if you are looking at the ebook, search or go to verse 108 of the 4th chapter. So here, this has the particular explanation of a certain bodhisattva has 2 topics, the general teaching and in particular the deeds of the teacher. So the first is the general teaching. So the first is the threshold. At what point does a bodhisattva become a certain bodhisattva? Because we talk about bodhisattvas, and then there's certain bodhisattvas. So like with the Buddha Shakyamuni, for a long time he was a bodhisattva, and then at some point he became certain, definite, that he was really on his way to awakening. So when was that? Of course, even before he was on his way to awakening, there's no doubt about that. But when did he become certain? As it says, since when is he the bodhisattva? Since doing the karma of the marks. So the bodhisattva, so when do we say he's the bodhisattva? Since doing the karma or actions that will fully ripen as the 32 great marks of a superior being. That's when it is. That's what it means. Since doing the karma of the marks means that when he got to the point where he'd gathered the accumulation of merit for 3 uncountable eons, which is an incredibly long time, and then he started gathering the accumulation of merit for each of the marks, each of the 32 marks. So he had to gather merit for each of these 32 marks. So since when is he the certain bodhisattva, you ask? Since the time of doing the deeds that accumulate the karma that has as its ripening the 32 major marks. He attains Buddhahood in 100 eons. So it's like from that point on, you know, you're on the home stretch. You've been at it for 3 uncountable eons, and you know, it's like the finish line is in sight. It's only 100 eons away. Which in comparison to 3 uncountable eons is like peanuts. It's nothing. So then the dharmas that are as qualities. So basically, what are the attributes of the bodhisattva, that certain bodhisattva? When we think about it, of course, the bodhisattva. Let's see, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. It says, high realms, high caste, full faculties, male, recalls lifetimes irreversible. So there are 6 here. He's born in the high realms only. He is born in a high caste. That means a position where he can practice the Dharma. He has full faculties. It means that he has all the sensory faculties. And also, I think in particular, this probably refers to the faculties of mind, because when we talk about people who are, what do we say? People who are cognitively challenged, in the scriptures, they call them as not having their full faculties. So this means that he's got all his mental and physical faculties, as well as probably the 5 of faith and so forth. Male. So this is in the sutra tradition. And one thing we have to, and this is kind of where we have to take a little bit of a tangent, because the ideas that people had in ancient societies, and not so ancient societies, frankly, up until very recently, and still in many parts of the world, there are cultural ideas of what men can do and what women can do. And so here, it's male. Now, why are we saying male? Is it something necessarily about being a male? It's difficult to say exactly, but it could well be that when you're going to be a certain bodhisattva, you're going to be born in a position that allows you to gather great merit. And this is what all the other ones are saying, being high realms, high caste, and full faculties. If you have all of those, you can gather merit. Likewise, if you were born in a society like ancient Indian society, but you were born female, you'd have had much less of an opportunity than the bodhisattva to actually practice the Dharma. It's not that there are any less capacities. When Ananda approached Buddha and asked him to ordain the nuns, Ananda asked, are women less capable of achieving enlightenment? And the Buddha's answer was no. It's clear that women have as much capacity to achieve enlightenment as men, inherently. But in terms of the society, there are different obstructions that happen. Now, another thing is that when you start reading all the Buddhist literature, particularly the things written in the Indian tradition from the sutras and all the Jataka tales, and you read the Way of the Bodhisattva, the commentary on the Ways of the Bodhisattva, and other things, whenever they tell stories about things that happened long, long ago, what happened to someone in a birth many, many eons ago, or when they tell the story about a birth that someone is going to take many, many eons into the future, in all of those stories, the assumption is that the society is going to be exactly the same as ancient Indian society. They say, well, there were kings, there were 4 castes, the husbands owned their wives and their children. So, it's like, this was just the assumption. So when you hear a story about the Buddha in the Buddha's previous lifetime, then the Buddha was always born in either the Brahmin or the Kshatriya class. More often than the Kshatriya caste, there were wives, there were children, and if he wanted to give his children away, he had the authority to do it. If he wanted to give his wife away, he had the authority to do it, because that was just the culture that they expected. And so I think that this reflects that they had this idea. In most cultures, everyone has the idea that the way they do things at this particular time is the way it's always been done, and the way it always will be done. And in particular, in terms of Asian societies, it's different than, if you look at Buddhist thought and Indian thought, there's a whole lot less in terms of political philosophy. Starting from the ancient Greeks, there was an idea, you look at, in particular, you think about like Plato, the Republic. This is like the beginning. I don't know if it's the beginning. In my Western, I can't remember well enough. But it's like, you can say it's the beginning of this theory of thinking about, well, how should an ideal society be constructed? And so there's this idea that societies can be constructed differently. Athenian society was a democracy, at least for the property-owning men. Sparta was more of a dictatorship. And so even with an ancient Greek society, they could, at that time, in the 5th century BC, the Greeks could see that there were different ways to organize your society. But in India, even though I think there was probably greater variation than you would see from the stories, I'm sure that there was more variation. And historically, people can probably go back and look at it. They still always used the same kind of terms, and so people had the idea that there were kings and four castes, and that's just the way it had always been, and the way it always is going to be. Ever since there were humans on the planet, starting at the beginning of the eon, excuse me, a lot longer than just the 200,000 years that scientists would, or that evolutionary biologists would say that, whatever they are. Evolutionary paleontologists, whatever they talk about modern humans rising 200,000 years ago. That's peanuts in comparison to the time that we talk about in the Buddhist scriptures. So there's just the idea that that's the way that that it had to be, and so that if you were going to be able to be reborn in a body that was going to allow you to practice the Dharma, you had a much better chance of doing this if you were male. Because if you were female, you would have been pretty much the property of your father and then of your husband. So that's the situation. So I think that's one reason why they're talking about it. What we should understand about it is that the Buddha is always going to be born. The bodhisattva will always be born in a position where they can actually gather the accumulation of merit, and they're not held back by the societal constraints. That's, I think, what we should understand it as. In the future, when there is some sort of matriarchy and men are owned by their wives, and then in the future, the bodhisattvas would, at that position, say, oh, well, of course, bodhisattvas are always female, because if you're male, you can't do anything. Right? So if that, so however, that's how I think we should understand this in the present day. Some people take this and there are two ways that this is misinterpreted. One common way of misinterpreting it is by saying, since the bodhisattva must be male, therefore women cannot achieve enlightenment. Women cannot become Buddhas. And so there are many people, and quite a few Tibetan men, who will say women can't become Buddhas, which is absolutely ludicrous. You may be a woman now, but you can be a Buddha in the future. If we follow the Tantra, you can become a Buddha in this lifetime, male or female, and there are examples. The first Tibetan to be enlightened, to achieve Buddhahood, was Yeshe Tsogyal, female, right? So, so just because you were born woman now, and the sutras say that you have to be born in a male body to achieve Buddhahood, doesn't mean that in the future you won't be born in a body that will be capable of achieving Buddhahood. So there's absolutely no reason to be discouraged by this teaching. So there's absolutely no reason to criticize people for this, say you can't do this, or to put women down for that. That's one thing. And the other thing is that it's not necessary to then say I can't do it, because of course you can do it. You have Buddha nature just like everyone else. We can all become arhats or Buddhas if we want to. We just have to work at it. Recalls lifetimes and irreversible. So the Buddha can also recall all his life, or the Bodhisattva can recall his lifetimes, and he has also has the quality of being irreversible, or unable to be turned away from awakening. So being unable to be turned away from awakening means that nothing's going to stop him. You can't just knows it. We can't, and the Buddha knows the Buddha's not going to get discouraged because the Buddha has such great compassion for all sentient beings. So, no matter how much, for the sake of all sentient, for the sake of all sentient beings, he is willing to bear with all types of suffering and all of the wrong actions and sufferings that he encounters without ever getting discouraged or saddened by it. He's willing to become the slave whom no one needs to buy. He's a great being who, even though he could get all of the greatest of wealth and resources, is willing to serve all sentient beings as humbly as if he were a dog at their feet. He is able to bear with all of the criticisms and harms that sentient beings inflict upon him without ever being tired or discouraged. So that is what we mean by a bodhisattva. And so that is the being who can do the 32. Who can do the karma that leads to the 30 that leads to ripening as the 32 deeds. And I just remembered that there are a couple of questions I wanted to answer before, and I better answer them before I completely forget about them. Okay, so we're going to take a little break here. Today I'm not being the most organized in my talk, but that's okay. So the questions were, there was one that came up among our studio audience yesterday that I think others you might have, and it's also related to one that someone else asked by electronic means. And so the question was, when we talk about before a few, we talked about the, where was it? I'm really not organized today in my mind. Right, when one has prepared a heinous act, attachment is impossible. So when does one become, oh, that's right, of worldly virtues, the volition of pique bears the greatest result. We spoke about yesterday about the karmas that prevent, that free us from the karmic results, such as when you achieve the level of forbearance on the path of joining, you are then freed from the lower realms. When you achieve this level of non-returner, you are freed from the desire realm. And when you achieve the level of arhat, you are freed from all three realms of samsara. And so achieving those eliminates or prevents karma that would ripen in those realms from occurring. But then the question is, well, isn't there still other types of karma that beings experience? Does it necessarily that? And so what we're talking about, that the karma that is blocked is the karma that would ripen as beings experiencing birth in those lower realms. The other types of karma that could experience in those realms do still occur. For example, when like Maudgalyana had achieved arhatship and was freed from the three realms of samsara and would never take rebirth in the three realms of samsara, he still had karmic, the bad karma that led to him being murdered by non-Buddhists. And there are also other stories of arhats being murdered because of their karma. And so you are freed from the karma that would ripen as rebirth, but other types of karma you are not free of. So that was the first question. And then the related question. Is after seeing that, well, does that mean that, the question is, does that mean that ordinary sentient beings must necessarily be reborn? And the answer is yes. We must necessarily be reborn until such time as we achieve, basically until you achieve arhatship in the foundation vehicle, or achieve Buddhahood. Actually, in the great vehicle, it's a little bit different, because once you become a first level bodhisattva, once you see the meaning of emptiness, then you no longer take birth out of the power of karma. Instead, you take it out of the power of compassion for sentient beings. However, generally for us ordinary beings, we still have to take birth. So that's why it's so important for us to gather the accumulation of merit and to make aspirations that we be born in places where we can practice the Dharma, such as in a world like this one, or if we're in the Mahayana, we do it the easy way, rouse bodhicitta and pray to be reborn in the realm of Sukhavati as fervently as you can, and that'll kind of take care of it, hopefully. If you're really fervent and you have bodhicitta, you've gathered enough merit and all that, and you visualize the realm of Sukhavati. So that was the digression for today. Well, those are the questions for today. Okay. So now explaining the aspects of this. So when we're talking about the being who is going to be to do the karma that's going to ripen as the 32 marks, what sort of a being and how does that being do it? A male in rose-apple land, when present, with the volition to awaken through contemplation, propels these over 100 eons more. Each arises from 100 merits. So you've got a male, in particular, in this rose-apple land, or Jambudvipa. And so when present means when there is a teacher present, when there is a Buddha or a teacher, so that because you have to have a Buddha that you're going to gather the accumulation in front of. And this bodhisattva also has the volition, the intention, or the wish to awaken to Buddhahood. And he gathers the accumulation of merit it can be either through listening, contemplating, or meditating. And here it is through contemplating, not through listening and not to meditating. We'll get to the reason for that in a moment. And he propels these, that is the 32, the karma that would ripen as the 32 marks, over 100 additional eons, 100 eons more. So more means after the 3 uncountable eons of gathering the accumulation of merit. So you've got 3 uncountable eons plus 100, the home stretch. Each arises from 100 merits. And so for each of the 32 marks, the bodhisattva has to do 100 meritorious acts, which is, what does that mean? What are we talking about there? That's a big question. So let's go through this in the commentary. Only a being on the support of a male in the rose-apple land. So often we talk about the body as being a support in the Dharma language, den in Tibetan. The support of a male in rose-apple land can propel the karmas that will ripen as the marks. Inhabitants of other continents or females cannot. So in the reason why the other continents can't is because it's the rose-apple land where the Buddha appears. And the females, I think this is just a similar issue as we were speaking about before. Where did I get to? I have something here I want to have open. He accumulates them when a teacher who is the object for accumulating the karma is actually present. So he has to have someone whom he can venerate or offer to or do something to gather the accumulation of merit. Whether the volition of, may I become a Buddha in the same way, is manifest or hidden. So he may be actually thinking it, or it may just be like so ingrained in him that it's kind of implicitly there. But he may actually be thinking, I'm doing this so that I can achieve Buddhahood. So that would be manifest or hidden is, it's there, but he's not necessarily conscious at the moment. He performs the karmas only with the volition that focuses on awakening. So his only hope is to achieve the awakening of Buddhahood. So now, as it says, the karma is through contemplation. So what is the reason for that? Karma born of listening is low, and that born of meditation does not ripen in desire. So this is born through contemplation. So he can either listen, contemplate, or meditate. So listening is like what you all are doing now. You're listening to the teachings, and it also includes when you're like reading teachings or however you're getting your teachings. You're watching the teachings on YouTube, which is what many of you are doing right now, anyways. So that's listening. Now, listening. The reason why listening is low is because it's actually a little bit less stable. You hear it, you understand it, you might think to yourself, yeah, that makes sense. You might think to yourself, I'm not certain about that. But even if you think that makes sense, even if you think, oh yeah, I'm totally convinced Khenpo David is such an amazing teacher, I believe everything he says, no, doesn't work. It's not stable. First of all, I'm not the amazing teacher, and you shouldn't believe everything I say. Take everything with a grain of salt. What you need to do then is you need to think about it. You need to reflect. Is it really that? Is it that? Like, what did Khenpo David say about that? Is it so? What does the book say about it? What do other sources say? How can that be? Think about this. And then at some point, as you contemplate it, you're going to come to a level where you have certainty. Like, yes, this is it, or no, definitely not, definitely yes, like you're certain. And you know that it's a certain way, so, that it's that way. So that is why contemplation is more stable and higher than listening. Meditation is in general higher than that, but when you do meditation, if you're doing dhyana, then where is it going? The karma going to ripen? It's going to ripen in the form realm. So these have to be karmas that are going to ripen in the desire realm, where the bodhisattva is going to take rebirth, right? If they're not going to be ripen here, what good do they do? So he propels these for over 100 great eons more. So they are not visible results. So in other words, they're results that are experienced in other lifetimes. They're not visible results because they're not experienced in this lifetime. They might be karma experienced on birth if he just did them in the previous lifetime to awakening to Buddhahood. But more likely, because there are 32, and each of the 32 takes 100, so they are talking about 3,200 different merits, is probably sometime over the 100 eons. So in other lifetimes, in other words, it's going to be karma experienced in other lifetimes. Now, when it says over 100 eons more, actually 100 eons more is a little bit of it's general. Like many things in Buddhism, it's all like, this is general teachings. Most Buddhas take 100 extra eons. But the Shakyamuni Buddha did it in 91. And how is it that the Shakyamuni Buddha did it in 91 eons? He saw the Buddha Tisha sitting in the... sitting in a cave in the all-encompassing sense base of fire. This is a meditation where he gains control over the element of fire and appeared as fire. And so the Buddha, or the bodhisattva, stood outside of that cave and he recited a verse for 7 days standing on one foot. And by the merit of this, he achieved Buddhahood. So, being you great bull, there is no other teacher like you in this world. There is none in the realms of Vaishrava, none in the palaces of the gods, none on the earth, and none in the mountains, none in the seas. No matter where you travel this world with its mountains and forests, you cannot find any. So this is the verse that he recited over and over again for a week. And by the merit of doing this, he, docked himself nine eons. He got an extra. It's like you get your bonus points for going up an extra level in the game. He got the extra nine eons off of that 100 extra eons. So that is the 32 major marks. So that is that. Now here's a sentence it says in the commentary. As it says in a sutra, I remember 91 eons to now completely, so naturally remembers his lifetimes. The story here is that the Bhagavan was going on alms, and they came to a village where the village elder, the village chief, was a Jain ascetic who practiced pulling his hair out of his head. And it was in the middle of a famine, and no one had enough food. And so the person, the village elder says, "How can you come begging for food in the midst of a famine when people don't have enough? Have you no shame? No one has enough." And the Buddha replied, "Village elder, village chief, I remember my lifetimes from 91 eons ago until now completely, and I have never seen anyone who has been harmed by giving a bit of food." So that is what the Buddha said. So that is just said, that's showing that he remembered all of his lifetimes. Now this is also talked about the recalls lifetimes in the previous stanza. So each of the 30 fully ripened 32 major marks that are thus propelled arises from 100 merits or volitions. And so you're doing, you've got 100 karmas, 100 volitions, 100 actions for kind of actions for each of these marks. And so what is the size? It says, as far as the quantity counted as 100, how much merit do you have to get to be one of the 100 merits to achieve it? You've got to do like 100 of these. So what are these 100 merits? So that each, when you're counting one merit, some say that it is the same as all the merit from generosity of all sentient beings, and there are many other such proposals. And these are kind of the fun part of today's topic, which aren't in Wangchuk Dorjes, but like, what do you have to do? So it's like as much merit as all sentient beings get out of generosity. That is one merit of the Buddha. He has to do, so you've done one, so you've got to do 3,199 more. So each of them is like that. Other people say that it is enough merit to produce all of the possessions that all sentient beings in the three realms have. Some people say that, well, you've got, the Buddha has the 32 qualities of full ripening, the 32 marks, right? And then there are the 18 unshared qualities, the qualities of the Buddha's wisdom. And so when you have the mental action of focusing on a Buddha with those 50 different qualities, then you have 50 volitions that come from that, and then you also have the volition of thinking, I want to be just like that. May I be just like that? So you have one of those for each of the marks, so you've got 50 plus 50 equals 100. And that way it is 100 merits, they say. Or you can think about it as you've got the 20, when we talked about the desire realms, we said there are 20 places in the desire realms. So there are 20 places in the desire realms, but that didn't count the cold hell, so that makes 28. And then you've got the 16 levels of the form realm, that is counting great Brahma and Brahma's ministers as one. The 4 levels of the formless realm, and so that gives you another 22. And so that way, 28 plus 22 equals, 26 and 22. That gives you, 28 and 20, that's right. So it gives you 48 different realms, and focusing on the beings in all those realms with compassion is 48. And then there is the volition that is concurrent with that. That's another 48. And so then you think, then there's the thought, how can I free all these sentient beings from these 3 realms? So that's 48 and 48, that's already 98. So we've got 99. And then you've got, how can a Buddha do that? It's thinking like, that's 99. And then you've got the 100th of thinking, I want to be just like that. right? So these are different ways of counting the merits. But basically, the main point is that you've got to have this thought of, I want to be just like the Buddha. I want to do that. That's what I have to do. If you have that thought is an incredible merit. When you think about the level of merit, it's like it says in the Noble Aspiration for Excellent Conduct. If someone should give all of the wealth in the universes to a Buddha, then that's a tremendous source of merit. But reading the Noble Aspiration for Excellent Conduct a single time is far greater merit than that. And why is that? Because the merit of giving all the wealth in the universes to the Buddhas only ripens once. Whereas if you have that thought of reading the Noble Aspiration for Excellent Conduct, having faith, and then feeling the wish to achieve enlightenment, if you have that is the, what do we say, it's the merit that keeps on giving. It brings you more and more. So it's that's the important thought. That's the one that seems to qualify all of these as being great merits. So when we're talking about merit, the size of merit is not measured in dollar signs. The size of the merit is not measured in meters or kilometers. It's not measured in temperature. You can't measure it physically or financially in any way. You can only measure it by the intention. Like when King Prasenajit was hosting the Buddha for 7 days, and the Buddha and the whole Sangha came, and they were eating, and the king had delicious food cooked, and he went and he served it with his own hands. And he was a king. He served it with his own hands, and the bhikshus were all delighted. And so there was the bhikshus, and there was the king and the ministers, and there was a little old woman in the back who was thinking, so wonderful that he's doing this. And then at the end of the meal, the Buddha said to the king, should I dedicate this to the person who gave the meal, or to the person who has the most merit? and the king said, to the person who has the most merit. So I dedicate this to the little old lady sitting in the back who's sitting there with faith. That was the first day. Then the second day, same thing. I'm going to cut out. There's not enough time to tell all the stories. This up to day 6, and every day the Buddha dedicated for this old woman in the back who was sitting there, who was rejoicing on everything so much. She got more merit than the king. And then on the 7th day, the king said, okay, ministers, you take care of that lady today, because I want to get the most merit today. I want the dedication to be for me today. And so the ministers went and they started poking and prodding the lady so that she couldn't think about anything. She forgot to rejoice, and then the Buddha finally dedicated the merit to the king. So actually, when you talk about 100 great merits, yeah, of course, doing things like giving your body and cutting pieces off of your thigh to give to mendicants and so forth, that's all great sources of merit, but it's actually pretty easy. You can just rejoice. Okay, where were we? Oh dear, I'm not going very quickly today, am I? Okay. Anyways, that's merit. In particular, the deeds of the teacher. That means the Buddha, Shakyamuni, as a particular certain bodhisattva. This has 2 topics: how he accumulated merit. Where am I going? Where did I start today? All right. Yeah. Okay. So how he accumulated merit. So there are 2 topics to the deeds: how he accumulated merit and how he perfected the Transcendences. So the last of 3 uncountables, Vipassana appeared. The first was Shakyamuni. When our teacher was a bodhisattva, how many Buddhas did he pay respects to in each of the incalculable eons? So you had 3 uncountable eons, right? They're each, 1 eon, 10 to the 59 power eons. So in the first incalculable eon, he paid respects to 75,000 Buddhas. In the second, 76,000, and in the third, to 77,000 Buddhas. Among them, the last Buddhas of the first 3 uncountable eons, respectively, were the Buddhas of Vipassana, Dipankara, and Ratnashikan, who had appeared. So these were the last Buddhas to appear in each of the eons. And so here it says respectively. When you look at the other commentaries, it seems like Vipashan was the last Buddha of the third uncountable eon. Dipankara was the last Buddha, the second, and Ratnashikan was the last Buddha of the first. Before all of those, the first Buddha to appear was called the sage of the Shakyas, or Shakyamuni. He appeared in a time of strife, and his lifespan, the duration of his teachings, his mother, and so on, were all similar to our teachers. So how did this happen? During his time, that is the previous Buddha Shakyamuni's time, our teacher was a potter named Illumination, who had offered him sweet water massages with ointment and service, and then prayed, "May I too awaken in the same fashion as him." So there are different versions of this story, and I usually tell a slightly different version. I usually tell the version of the story where the Buddha Shakyamuni, during the time of the previous Buddha Shakyamuni, the bodhisattva was the poor Brahmin farmer who offered the thin gruel, which is found in other sources. So here it gives this version where he's a potter named Illumination. They're not contradictory, they're just different presentations. That's how we say it. Either way, it's making the aspiration in the presence of the Buddha Shakyamuni. May I be just like him. That's the important thing. So one of the things that the Bodhisattva did is he perfected the 6 transcendences. Now we talk much more about the 6 transcendences in the Mahayana than in the foundation vehicle, but they are also present in the foundation vehicle. They're spoken about in the Theravada tradition as well. They're not a purely Mahayana thing. They're qualities of the Buddha. And so how he perfected the transcendences has 4 topics. How he perfected transcendent generosity, how he perfected transcendent discipline and patience, how he perfected transcendent diligence, and how he perfected transcendent dhyana and full knowing. So giving to all compassionately perfected generosity. So he giving all, from his eyes to his feet, any possessions, everything he held dear, anything at all, to all who needed, so giving all to everyone, not from hope for a high state, or out of fear, or out of any other quality, but out of compassion. He gave them compassionately. He completely perfected transcendent generosity. It's by being willing to give everything away, not holding anything back for himself. So that was how he perfected transcendent generosity. How he perfected transcendent discipline and patience. While not detached, to cut his limbs did not perturb him, patience and discipline. So when he was on the path, he was often harmed by other beings, or he was asked for parts of his body and he willingly gave them. He fed himself to a tiger. He did all sorts of actions, and it didn't bother him. And that was the perfection of patience. Patience not as in terms of being like he was infinitely able to wait in lines. Patience as the ability to forbear any insults or physical harm without getting angry. Patience and discipline. So discipline, the aspect of discipline is always maintaining a peaceful mind and never acting to harm. So while he was not detached at the time, so because we're talking about this in the foundation vehicle school, he, as the Buddha, the bodhisattva, was an ordinary sentient being just like us, who experienced pain and in the same ways that we do for the entire 3 uncountable eons plus the extra 100 of gathering the marks. He was an ordinary sentient being, and just as it would hurt us to take a big machete and cut off a hunk of our flesh, it hurt him too. But he was willing to do it. To cut his limbs did not even perturb him. At that time, he perfected the transcendence of patience and discipline. Then how he perfected transcendent diligence? By praising Tisha, diligence. So this is the story I just mentioned a few moments ago. When the Bhagavan was a bodhisattva, he saw the Tathagata Tisha in a mountain cave and the absorption of all-encompassing fire element, and stood on 1 foot, praising him for 7 days with a single verse, the verse that I recited a few moments ago. By reciting praises of Tishya in this way, he gathered 9 eons merit and completed the perfection of transcendent diligence. So, by being so diligent that one time. So what is diligence? It's like being really, in the way of the bodhisattva, it says diligence is a zest for virtue. It's just like always wanting to do, and being excited to do virtuous actions. And so here, the bodhisattva was just totally excited to have the chance, and so excited to have, enthusiastic about his chance to practice virtue that he'd be, standing on one foot. This is even, these days we make fun of people, well, we don't do it anymore. It's more a thing from a few years ago, isn't it? People who would camp out outside of an Apple store the day before an iPhone launch. It's like these are people, if they have that level of dedication. Now, we don't consider that's diligence because they're actually doing it for a worldly reason, an iPhone. But it's like if you have that sort of dedication, or it's similar, I think, when we think about when the Gyalwang Karmapa gives teachings and there's a limited number of seats and they put them online and everyone buys the tickets in 20 minutes. This has happened on a number of occasions. And so the people who are just so excited to get it, that's sort of like diligence. Depends upon their motivations. It really depends on the motivation. Anyways, I better stop and get on with this. How he perfected transcendent jhana and full knowing, that is prajna. Samadhi and mind just prior to. Just prior to what? Just prior to the Vajra-like samadhi. So immediately before he achieved the Vajra-like samadhi, he perfected transcendent jhana and transcendent prajna. He produced the Vajra-like samadhi and at that time completed the transcendences of dhyana and mind, or full knowing, that is prajna. So at that time that he achieved that, that's the highest samadhi, and he also at that point had developed the highest or greatest prajna that was able to see the nature of all phenomena. And when did he do this? Just immediately prior to enlightenment. So it was immediately prior to achieving the knowledge of extinction and non-arising, the knowledge that all the obscurations had been extinguished and that they would never arise again. So that's the transcendent dhyana and prajna. So these are the 6 transcendences. So they're the same ones that we talk about in the Mahayana: generosity, discipline, patience, diligence, jhana, and prajna. So these are the 6. So why are they called transcendences? Now they're also we have to admit, a lot of people use the Sanskrit word paramita, or is it paramita? Paramita. And then there is the other people translate it as perfection. So what does the word mean? Paramita means going. Ita is a word for going. Param means across or other side. So going to the other side, transcending. So that's why I translate it as transcending. Other people translate it as perfection, the perfection of discipline. Because these 6 go beyond in terms of their own excellence, they are transcendences. Okay, we're going to go just a little bit more today. Go through a little bit more. So explanation of the 3 bases of meritorious action to rely on. So this is the second major section of the specific explanations, isn't it? Yes, it is. So we've completed the first, the explanation of the 3 obscurations. So now we're talking about the 3 types of meritorious actions that we need to do. These are basically the 3 primary ways that you gather the accumulation of merit. And so it's 3 topics. Explaining the terms in general. The second is the nature of each classification. And the third is the specific explanation of the generosity of Dharma. So explaining the terms in general. So we're talking about, in the sutras, it talks about there is the basis of meritorious action born from generosity, the basis of meritorious action born from discipline, the basis of meritorious action born from meditation. So what are these? So the 3 are merit, action, or the basis, like the karmic paths. Perhaps it should be, instead of the basis, it should probably be their basis. Actually, the basis of merit and the basis of action. Okay? So it's similar to the karmic paths. Like the karmic paths, you can talk about karma and karmic paths, action and the paths to the action. So here we also have like the merit, the action, and the basis. So from a sutra it says, the basis of meritorious action born from generosity, the basis of meritorious action born from discipline, and the basis of meritorious action born of meditation. So here Wangchuk Dorje abbreviates the quote slightly. The three are either merit that has an attractive full ripening. So when we say that something is merit, when you've got, then that means that it's going to have a good full ripening. That's what we mean when we say right? Merit isn't like just because you get a gold star from someone, because it's going to have a good full ripening. Actions with the nature of karma, so it's something that it's an action, or their basis for engaging, the intention that is both. So they're said to be the bases of meritorious action. So we're talking about these three, the basis of generosity, discipline, and meditation. So they can be any one of these three. They aren't necessarily all three, but they're some of these three. So for example, it is like was explained with the 10 karmic paths. Some are both karma and karmic path, and some are only karmic paths. Similarly, with these bases of meritorious action, generosity, discipline, and meditation, some are merit, some are action, some are the basis, some are multiple ones. So how does that work? To illustrate this with the merit born of generosity first. So you've got the karmas of generosity of body and speech are all three. Because when you're doing a meritorious action with body and speech, it's going to be merit because it's going to have a good full ripening. It's going to be action because you're doing it with your body. It's an action. That's the nature of them, right? And it is the basis because it is the basis for volition, for the volition at that time to engage the object. So it's the basis. The volition at that time, though, that volition is merit because it has the full ripening, and it is action because it's a mental action, but it is not a basis because it's not supporting anything. Okay? And the Dharma is simultaneous with that. That is, your other mental factors would be the other mental factors would only be merit. They're merit, but they're not actions, and they're not they're not the support. The other two follow the same pattern. So it's basically that way, kind of dividing it up and looking at, say, which is merit, which is the base, and so forth. So that's what we mean by these three bases. So the reason why there are these three, so we have three. We have generosity, discipline, and meditation. So why is it these three in particular? The reason these three are explained is that achieving possessions, karma, and liberation, or alternatively, achieving possessions, a human or divine body, and a body in one of the higher two realms depend upon these. So if you want to if you want to be able to make progress during the path, you have to be born in the higher realms, and you have to have enough resources that you're going to be able to practice. If you are born as a human in the rose apple land, even in the presence of the Buddha, but you are so deprived that you can't think of anything other than where is my next meal going to come from, you're going to have less of a chance, right? Or if you are like that, I mean, if even not when the Buddha's around, I think you've got a better chance because the Buddha can walk by and you can feel faith. Nowadays, people who are born in if you don't have enough stuff, it's hard. If you don't have enough resources, it's hard to practice. Basically, you're too worried practicing. You're too worried about where you're going to get your next meal. So that's why we need to practice it. And then, so that's generosity. If you practice the generosity, then you're going to have enough resources, enough possessions or enjoyments to be able to practice. If you have generosity, but you don't have discipline, then you could be reborn in any one of the any one of the 5 classes of samsara. You could be reborn as a rich, hungry ghost. You could be reborn as wherever if you don't have discipline. So it's important to have discipline, as I have stressed on previous times. So you have to take and keep the lay precepts at least. And also you need to be born in the higher realms. And so the higher 2 realms, if you want to be reborn in the form or formless realm, where you can have certain opportunities, if you're already a noble being, that is. If you've not become a noble being yet, it's not very good to be reborn there. But if you've already achieved the path of seeing, and then you're reborn in the form realm, it's fine. So if you want to do that, you need to have meditation. That is the dhyana meditation. So that is the explanation of that. And I think this is a good place to stop today. So today is Sunday, which means that tomorrow, being Monday, is our regular day off. And we are also coming close to the end of this chapter. And so we will finish the chapter on Thursday. So we'll have 3 more classes, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then on Friday is the celebration of the Gyawan Karmapa's 35th birthday. So here, there are celebrations all over the world, and so, and I've been seeing posts for some of these online. But here at Trangam Monastery in Canada, we will be doing the offerings to the Guru's puja that His Holiness wrote in 2007, and that has been done at the Kaju Munlam every year since, and at other Kaju Munlams. And so we've decided here that the best way to celebrate the Karmapa's birthday is to make a lot of offerings, give him a lot of birthday presents, make a lot of offerings to the Guru. So we'll be doing that starting at 8 a.m. Pacific time, Pacific Daylight Time, on Friday the 26th of June. And all of you can join along. Now, of course, we're still, although things in BC are beginning to open up a little bit, here at the monastery we haven't really begun opening up. But if you'd like to join us by webcast, you are absolutely welcome to join us. Not only that, you can follow along and participate. You can download if you don't have a copy of the Kaju Munlam book, you can download ebook versions from dharmaebooks.org. Both in English, Chinese, Tibetan, German, Spanish, French, whatever languages are up there, you can download in your favorite language and chant along with the offerings of gurus. It's a wonderful puja, and there are lots of good melodies that we get to sing. So please, I hope you can all join us for that on next Friday morning. So that is enough for our class today. And we should now dedicate the merit of teaching and listening to the Dharma to the benefit of all sentient beings, so that they may be swiftly freed of the sufferings of samsara, in particular the sufferings of plague, famine, war, deprivation, poverty, brutality, violence, and that they may enjoy happiness and joy and pleasant lifetimes from now until such time as they reach Buddhahood, and may they never be turned back on that path. So thinking in this way, please now dedicate the merit. O sanam de tam je simpani Tobne nye pedranam pamchene Kegana chimba lab trumbai Sibetsoledro wadro warsho. Thank you.